안녕하세요. 네. So hello everyone. Welcome to the session. My name is I'm Introduction. I'm associate professor of English language education at SNU. So I'm your moderator for this invitation. Thank you all for being here today. It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce our invited speaker today, Karin Aguado. My speaker.
Excellent.
Thank you. So she is a professor of German as a foreign and second language at the University of Kassel. So she is also serving as a department head and the managing director of the college. She is one of the leading scholars in the field of German as a foreign and second language. Her research focuses on individual factors for language learning success and multiword expression in foreign and second language acquisition, and empirical research methods in language teaching and learning. She has also led numerous research programs on intercultural communication, training, multilingualism and multiculturalism in higher education, and competence-based approach to German language learning. The title of today's talk is Chong's Prefabricated Expressions, Complex Construction, the role of multiword unit in second language activity. I know we are all looking forward to this exciting talk today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Karin Aguado.
Thank you so very much for your kind words. Oh, there is echo. Is it okay? Yeah, no, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction and for your kind words about me and my work. As you said, as Professor, sorry, what was his name? Yeah. Already said, and as you already can see, what my talk will be about is chunks of prefabricated expressions and complex constructions. So prefabricated word strings and people. Multi-word units are of particular relevance in every language use. They are ubiquitous and frequent, and also they processed holistically, thus contributing to fluent and unmarked language use. In my talk, I would like to present the current state of research in multi-word units and the status in current grammar theory, language acquisition, and language teaching. As you can see, the structure of my talk will be as follows. How many minutes do I have? Maybe I should check this.
You have 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay?
I have 20 minutes Q&A.
All right, all right. Because it's such a huge topic. I really need to limit myself, and maybe I will one or the other aspect I will skip a little. But I would like to show you how multi-word units are conceived of in construction grammar and language processing, and in language acquisition, L1, native language, first language acquisition, and second language acquisition, and also what is of importance for you all and for us is how we can treat them in language teaching. And there is a proposal I developed, developed from the research literature, from what we know from the literature as of yet, and I would like to present it shortly, and then you see concluding remarks about my bibliography. I will not talk further. So it's long. And you can have that. I can give you that, and I can give you the presentation if you like. So all natural languages have a large repertoire of common, idiomatically shaped, and strongly conventionalized word combinations, which have become autonomous multi-word units. I have some examples for you. I will not read them out. You can read them for yourself. And we have these expressions. We also have constructions like these or expressions like these. Then you can see over there, we have collocations. Make a mistake, submit an application. And sometimes learners are prone to not use the specific words, just instead they use make, for example, yeah, instead of all these verbs. Make the table. We talk about this together. And Bradford also these expressions, and it goes on. Wait for, you see there are prepositions we need. We cannot choose them individually. We cannot decide to use another preposition. It's these prepositions we have to use. Or we have these discontinuous constructions. That is, if one says the more, you wait for the more. Or once it's on the one hand, there is an expectation that there will be on the other hand. So last expressions like in everyday language, like I would like to know, can you tell me? I'm sure that. All these expressions are more or less fixed. There are differences between them, and I will talk about this soon. These maybe I will go back. Yeah, back. Okay. Yeah, this. This is excellent. It's wonderful. Okay, this is fun. Yeah, I would like to add that there are differences in terms of origin, in terms of complexity, in terms of strength, function, and frequency. As you can see, these expressions, they all have totally different functions. They come from different origins. And some of them are very fixed, yeah, and some of them are more like patterns, slots and fillers. And you can they have to be modified, they have to be adapted, they have to be in terms of tense, in terms of person, and so on. But what they have in common is that they are prefabricated, that they are frequently used, and that they are communicatively highly effective. This is what they share. See what happens? Yeah, exactly. So over 30 years ago, a colleague named Sinclair described this phenomenon I'm talking about as the principle of idiom is that a language user has available to him a large number of pre-constructed phrases that constitute a single choices, even though they might appear to be analyzable into segments. It's true, we can analyze them. They are analyzable. And they have been constructed before, but now there are constructions we can use as they are. We don't have to construct them anew. And competent, that is fluent, appropriate, and correct language use is characterized by the use of these preferred and expected expressions. That means they are preferred by the speakers and they are also expected by the other speakers. Yeah, so there is preference and expectation, even though they are variously complex. And you can find them in all modalities and registers of language use. You find them in everyday language, but you also find them in educational language. You find them in scientific context of use. We have a certain way of expressing things. We have a certain way of structuring our papers, for example. And there are expressions to structure the paper. Okay, so early unsystematic observations and mainly anecdotal evidence concerning the high proportion of such units in spoken and written language have now been well substantiated empirically by corpus linguistics. And I would like to show you what is this? Let's show you. Escape. Oh, it's escape. Okay, I'll do it. I don't touch this. Okay, so corpus linguistic has provided empirical evidence. People very often say, "Oh, there are very many expressions in the German language or in any other language," but only since corpus linguistic has really counted them, we have empirical evidence that we find these expressions throughout the entire language use. And this colleague named Engelberg, there's the German original, and he said there's a huge variety of multi-word expressions will have non-compositional properties or a high degree of usuality and which claim their place in the lexicon or constructicon. It's called, in German, it's called Konstruktikon. And Konstruktikon is a fusion between construction and lexicon. And this means that in contrast to traditional lexica, a constructicon comprises not only individual words, but also a structured network of constructions. Yeah, so there is not just single word, but it's the entire construction you can find. As a consequence of that, in construction, grammar approaches the modular conception of lexicon on the one hand, and grammar on the other hand, prevailing in traditional linguistics, is abandoned in favor of a dynamic conception. That is, there is no strict line between lexicon and grammar, but it's continuing. It's a continuum with or it depends on the expression, but sometimes even fused. Yeah, so it's a dynamic dynamic conception. And in this approach, language systems are seen as inventories of non-compositional or high-frequency form meaning pairs of varying complexity that are not analytically processed ever used. See Goldberg. Goldberg is one of the most prominent colleagues in the construction grammar. And each construction is not only semantically relatively motivated, so it's not arbitrary, but it's motivated. And it has an additional constructual meaning that contains contextual situational information for its use. That is, we see in the construction that it is that a certain context is required to use this construction. And to sum up, competent language use is characterized by using a large amount of these multi-word units. And accordingly, language learning requires the acquisition of these expressions. And the use of these expressions, ideally previously individually adapted in interaction, always contextually embedded and functionally unambiguous, that enables speakers to communicate and to participate actively in the language community, thus expressing their being part of the community. By using these expressions, you can express your being part, and you can become part of the community. Consequently, a large input offer is indispensable for its success. This means we need input. Without input, this is undoubtedly true. I think everybody will agree. Without input, there is no language acquisition. This is and it's indispensable. Oh, I did it. Due to its theoretical neutrality and its wide range, my talk and my ideas are based on the psycholinguistic definition proposed by Ray in 2002. Alison Ray is a researcher. She speaks of formulaic language, even though she sometimes speaks of formulaic language, sometimes prefabricated language. So this is, we have over 40 different terms for that. And this is a problem. Yeah, we have in terms of definition and in terms of what do we really speak about, this is not really unambiguous. But what she said was a sequence, she says multiple units or prefabricated speech is a sequence, continuous or discontinuous. As you could see before, we had a discontinuous sequence of words or other elements which is or appears to be prefabricated, that is stored and retrieved wholly from memory at the time of use, rather than being subject to generation or analysis by the language grammar. So this is a word definition for the next few minutes. Since these multiword units seem to be processed as big words, Alice called them big words. It's not just 2 or 3 words, just one big word. These sequences are ascribed the status of perceptual and memory units functioning as a shortcut, as Wei said, by providing a shortcut to production and comprehension, and also a processing advantage. That means it's we can of course we can produce it, we can construct it, but we don't have to construct it. We can use it, and that is this is a shortcut, and it gives us more capacity, more cognitive capacity for other things that really have to be constructed creatively. So you see this advantage also on the processing side. Fluency on the one hand, interaction on the other hand, but processing is here. That's very important. The following quotes by colleagues from the SLA community may illustrate the importance which these units have in terms of native-like fluency. These are, as you can see, it's been 25 years ago that Pauly and Sider said it's this store or this store of memorized constructions more than anything else that is the key to native-like fluency. Or as Foster said, it's the fluency and familiarity of native-like language can only be explained by the fact that they are not generally composed anew every time. Yeah, so these expressions are very important, not only for idiomatic but also for fluent languages. Okay, to sum up, fluent performance is made easier if the speakers have a command of a repertoire of multi-word items, which can readily be used when it is demanded by the situation. And there is another quote by Alice, who says, this is what is unmarked, regular, normal language use. And if you want to make learners competent speakers of the target language, then they also need to learn these expressions, these sequences. Okay, so this was language processing. I was really quick out. And now I will turn to multi-word units and L1 acquisition. That is the first language acquisition. And since these expressions are very frequent in the input, they are acquired very early in first language acquisition. And what differentiates first language acquisition from second or foreign language acquisition is the situationally contexted, embedded use of language. Yeah, that is when you learn your first language, the entire environment, all day long, whenever you wake up until you go to sleep, is input containing such expressions. And also what is different in first language acquisition and in second language acquisition is that the learners or the language acquirers have shared attention with competent speakers, parents, caregivers, and so on. That is, it's always pick and nook, here and now. Yeah, it's different. It's not as decontextualized as we teach very often in the language classroom. In terms of language L1 acquisition, so the following acquisition sequence is well documented. First of all, imitation. I will not go into further detail, but it's that first of all, children imitate what they hear in their surrounding. And there's very good research by Ann Peters who shows that children imitate, but that they do not imitate all of it. they segment. They have to segment, imitate. So the second step is analysis, and then there is generalization, and then there is transfer. These are the 4 steps. This takes time. It's not that you imitate an expression as a child and next day you analyze it, maybe 5 years later. Yeah. So this is about the first. They listen, then they imitate, then they use, and maybe sometime later they analyze. There are some expressions, I'm sure everybody knows one or the other, that only when you were an adult you notice, oh, this is an expression. Yeah, this can be analyzed like this, because you did not have to analyze it before, it was not necessary. You can do it, but you don't need to do it in order to use it adequately, in order to be an appropriate speaker. Okay. So now that even though first language acquisition is generally successful, there are sometimes large individual differences. And this always depends on the amount of input and on the quality of the input someone gets. So there are 2 factors: quality of the input, amount of input, and interaction. These are the main prerequisites for any language acquisition. So I will now go to L2 acquisition. These expressions also play a very important role in terms of fluency, idiomaticity, and communication. But in contrast to child L1 learners, second or foreign language learners already have a command of the language. Depending on their age and level of literacy or education, they already know what the language is. They already know there are words, there are rules. It is important just to combine these words and rules in an adequate manner. Handwerker and Madlena introduced a very illustrative terminological distinction in this context. Namely, they said while child L2 learners who acquire a foreign or second language in social oral interaction, they describe them as chunk gatherers. Adult language learners are word watching. And I think this is very interesting. The latter already know that the word carries meaning, and you know how learners of a foreign language, how they read texts. Yeah, they look for the words. They look for single words. They don't look for expressions. So they look for single words in order to get the meaning of the text, or in order to extract the most important information. So they are word watchers, but that means that they miss out very many important details if you only look for words. Like, I have a short list, namely the question, which other words does the word normally co-occur? So if you only look for words and you don't look to the left or to the right, then you cannot see with which other words this word co-occurs. So, but this is an important information, to use the word appropriately, to use the word idiomatically. The second is which distributional, lexical, and grammatical rules underlie the complex construction. So if you only look for words, you cannot see the construction, and you cannot see how the construction is constructed. And last but not least, what are their functions? Yeah, so this is what adults and non-child L2 learners miss out if they only concentrate on words instead of on complex constructions or on multi-word units. So I will now come to some research results. Most of the research conducted so far is related to English and foreign language. In this context, that's fine, but I mean, I'm working in the field of German as a foreign and second language. So unfortunately, in German, for German as a foreign language, we do not have very much empirical research on this topic. The majority of the studies in English in terms of English, are experimental or quasi-experimental intervention studies that investigate the question of what influence the explicit teaching of multi-word units has on the fluency, receptive or productive, of two learners of English. And I can now show you some results I think are important also for us. We can transfer them to the context of German word form language. So first of all, these are results from purposeful teaching, purposeful teaching of multi-word units. Thompson at Ali 2023 found interesting long-term effects of their training studies. For example, two learners developed into autonomous multi-word units collectors after several weeks of intervention. I think this is important. So there was a kind of sensibilization for them that they don't only look for words, but that they look for construction. So they were taught or trained to look for constructions, and this is what they did after some time. So they had an awareness of the importance of these expressions, and they were able to productively use them and to independently, all by themselves, find sequences, other sequences, and successfully transfer this to outside the intervention study. So they were able to find it themselves. So purposeful teaching of multi-word units helps learners to become autonomous multi-word units collectors. So as you can see, we can help students, adult students, to become chunk gatherers. Yeah, they need not stay word collectors or word watchers for the rest of their life. So you can teach them. And one of the few quasi-experimental and at the same time multi-method and longitudinal studies on German as a second language is by Lenz and Varas, two colleagues from Switzerland, according to which participants in their intervention group showed a significant increase in fluency compared to the control group after 10 or 16 weeks of targeted chunk-based learning. So they were trained. They used a chunk and they became fluent. In a way, that's something we already knew. Yeah, it helps us to become fluent, but also you can use it as a teaching method, and you can also support students to become fluent by teaching and practicing these chunks. So it helps to improve their receptive and productive fluency. And also, what I think is important is not only the productive fluency, but also receptive fluency. Also to understand, not word by word, but to develop an attitude also to wait a little if there's an expression and not just a word. Yeah, to wait a little and to be prepared that it can be a multi-word unit. So receptive fluency is also very helpful for decoding, understanding, and reacting afterwards. Okay, so that was this point, and also it has been demonstrated that this an approach that it leads to increased learners' self-confidence and self-assurance. That is, that they when they say, "I'm able to find these expressions, I'm able to use these expressions," this makes them more self-confident, which is important. Important for the aspect of motivation, right? Of the willingness to continue to learn. If you note that you can do something yourself, that you are not dependent on the teacher showing you what is the word, what is an expression, but you can find it yourself. That is helpful. And it improves the learner's attitude and willingness towards communicating in the L2. We have evidence, we have empirical evidence that shows it. And also the last point I think is help learners to develop an improved communicative competence. So you see there are in all these studies I looked at, they were from 2020 to 2023. So they are quite recent. quite recent studies on English, mainly English as a foreign language. Okay. So I will now, based on these empirical findings and some of the theoretical presuppositions, some didactic suggestions made by Ettinger and Kuhn, I would like to propose the following steps or phases, maybe it's more phases than steps, in teaching multi-word units in the L2 classroom. And I show you all of them at the same time, and I will then go into detail a little. Let's see. Yeah. So the first step is noticing, and you can see I put into brackets. I put some explanation. It's important that it's subjective noticing. That means that the learner herself or himself notices something. Yeah, so that is individual. It's not, you cannot guarantee noticing. You cannot do it from, you can help noticing, you can support noticing, but you cannot guarantee whether it takes place or not. Depends on the individual. Then the next step would be active imitation. That means to actively encourage learners to imitate. Interactive practicing, that is to practice the expressions I have noticed before, I have imitated before, interactively, because you don't use language all by yourself. You use it in interaction with others. I'm talking about oral language acquisition, oral language use now, but the same is true for written acquisition. That is, if you read text and if you have to produce text, you can use parts of what you have read. You don't have to write everything totally anew, which is not to be mixed up with plagiarism. Yeah, to make clear, it's a different thing. This what I'm talking about is in terms of acquisition, in terms of becoming a fluent and idiomatic speaker of a language. So the next step would be decoding. Only after I have noticed, imitated, and practiced, used the multi-word expressions, then it is time to start with the decode, to analyze something. It's the other way around. It's not first explanation and then use it, but first use it and then analyze and explain it. And the last point is, or last step is self-directed transfer. I need to, and then, okay. Okay, so I will now, it's quick now, but I will now go into the single steps. So the first, as I said, is noticing. And these are somewhat guidelines for teachers, how they can help students to go these steps, or how they can help them through these phases. As we said before, we need input. Input is required, but we need, in order to acquire such expressions, we need rich, but in a way it's a lot, but it's also qualitatively good input. Salient means it must be noticeable. It must be either visually, acoustically, or whatever, non-verbally presented, so that learners can notice that. Input which arouses learners' interest, readiness, or desire to engage with it more intensively. That is, if there is no, as I said before, if there is no subjective noticing, if there is no attention on the learner side, it will not be able, or he or she will not be able to acquire the expression. Active imitation means that you should, as a teacher, encourage the learner to imitate the structure to be learned, or the ready-made expression from the input, rather than trying to construct themselves on the basis of words. Sometimes it's contradictory to what we often say in the language version. Say it in your own words. Yeah, okay, one can say it in one's own words, but one can start with that to be safe, to know this is the expression, this is correct, this is situationally adequate, yeah, to start with. To analyze it and to become creative is also important, but this is later on. So you don't have to start like this, because you don't have to construct first and then automatize, but you automatize first and then deconstruct. This is the flip kind of. Okay. The next was interactive practicing. That is, have learners practice and automatize these units in dialogic interactions in which nothing can go wrong. I wrote a success-oriented or erfolgsorientiert. I am not sure whether the English expression is totally correct, but the meaning is that you help students to use these expressions and they cannot make mistakes. Yeah, so they practice it in a correct way, which means you give them a lot beforehand. It does not mean that they only are like parrots. It's only for a start. It's only for them to become confident, for them to become fluent, and to help them decide what can be imitated from the input and what not. Yeah, what needs to be changed. As I said before, the fixedness of the different expressions is different. Some are totally fixed and you cannot be creative with them. Some are just patterns, and you can and you must adapt them to situations. And so this is what needs to be learned. Even though they are very different expressions, they are not fully, you cannot use them with your full creativity. Or you can do it if you're a writer, if you play with language, or if you want to take a risk that nobody understands you. But this is not what we want. Yeah? We want the normal, the unmarked language use. Okay, step 4. Let's see. After the linguistic structure has been perceived, imitated, automatized, the time has come for conscious, explicit engagement with its grammatical form. Since up to this point, when we start with the decoding process, multi-word units have been encountered by the learners in very large numbers. They have received sufficient positive evidence. Positive evidence means this is input that is correct. Input they can be sure of is correct, and they can imitate this. They can now start to analyze it. So guided means encouraged and supported by the teacher, but self-directed. So the learners who they use these expressions, they know when to use them, they know their function, and now they can start to decompose and analyze them. It is not always necessary. Yeah, this might be a step you can leave out, but on the other hand, even especially adult learners, they want to understand. Very often they want rules, they want to understand, but it's not that you give the rules and then they construct expressions, but that they use language and then they deduct the rules, maybe in pairs or in groups. So the last step is transfer. Real good language learning has only come into action if learners are able to transfer what they have learned from the classroom block, from a certain task or a certain practice to other situations, in other classroom situations, in other situations outside the classroom. So transfer is what is decisive in learning. If you can learn something and you can repeat it and then you can forget it. This is not learning. Yeah, learning means it's more like a Bildung. It's something, it's a transformation of your language or your linguistic system. So only what has been learned, only when what has been learned can be applied outside with a time lag. That means later, not 5 minutes later, but maybe a day later, 5 days later, or in another situational context. We speak of successful learning. So the transfer of knowledge should be prepared in class. So we should prepare it in class by means of pair group work with authentic tasks as well as role plays, as I said, interactive practicing to prepare learners for transferring their skills to language use outside the classroom. What we often expect is that learners can do it themselves. So we have the classroom, there we have tasks, there we have group work, there we have practice, and then we expect them to readily use this outside the classroom. And this is what very often does not happen. But we can prepare it in class by means of active working in groups. Okay. So I will, let's see. Yeah, a little later. I will end my talk with some concluding remarks, and in a way, it's a repetition of what I said, but I think it's important to acknowledge that everyday language is based on the reproduction of what has already been prefabricated. We can be creative all the time. We have the capacity, we can do it. But we don't do it because we don't have to do it, because it would be very uneconomic. Yeah, so we use these ready-made expressions and units. This is because this is the unmarked case of language use. We should encourage language learners also to acquire these expressions and use them in the classroom. And teaching and learning how to speak idiomatically and fluently entails integration of implicit and explicit processes. I did not explain what of these steps I mentioned are implicit or explicit, but they are. What is important is their combination. So it's not only implicit and it's not only explicit. It's not only explanation. It's not only using, but it's both. Both, and it depends on the time when you do it. It's very often that learners want rules before they have already automatized something, and there are a number of practices that can help learners forget about the rules, just use the language and become fluent. So it's these processes such as I said, noticing, imitation, practicing, decoding, and transfer. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sorry, I was a little yeah.
Perfect. Thank you again for your wonderful presentation. So now we have time for Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can ask.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the teacher from German language department, and I thought you're actually very valuable. And I have one question.
Yes.
In the introduction, you mentioned that potential usage of coordinates to empirically verify the probability of multiword language. And if we analyze the text, like real use text, there are salient terms like batch out with source and something, but in authentic phrases that native speakers use, you see a lot of adverbial phrases between that can uncontinuous multi-word units. But do you consider that preposition in adverbial phrasing as meaningful collocation in school education.
Yeah. I don't know whether I really got the rest of your question. You were asking if because the expressions, and this is how you find them in the textbooks, ja, warten auf, gehen nach oder so etwas, or so, and like this, they don't appear in everyday language. This is what you mean.
I mean, the warten auf,
yeah,
that expression is very difficult.
Yeah,
and learn as a child.
Yeah,
but sometimes warten and auf are distinct.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And yeah, in a way, this was all the examples I showed you were, of course, artificial. And so far as they were contextless, there was no context. Yeah, and you're right. Warten auf, as such, is usually not to be heard. And yeah. So, but this is the expression is warten auf, but what I suggest then is to work with real rules, not these digits. For me, what was important was to show that there are multi-word units on very different levels, with very different strengths also, because you can only say warten auf. You cannot say warten für, for example, yeah, which is a very common false friend for some speakers. But you have to work with real context. This was just an example that there are prepositions or words or verbs that reign prepositions, and these prepositions also are for the cases that they reign. So this is something that is, I think, anyway, it's being treated in the classroom because of the dative or accusative that is important to be used after this problem. But you're right. One should work with real examples. But this is artificial.
And that the corpus analysis is useful when we extract the word right before or right after the keyword. So I want the German textbook, in Korea, and more than half of the Trump expressions reveal that they are not continuous.
Yeah, that's right.
Trump came up with totally different prepositions, like if I tell you the
okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But what I said was, this is why I used Ray's definition, because I like this definition. She was talking about continuous or discontinuous consequences. Yeah, that means they don't have to follow right, but they ask for one another. They require one another. So this is what I meant when I said sometimes you have to, as a learner, you have to acquire the attitude to wait for something, not to expect that something appears just the way you find it there in the textbook, but that these they belong together, but they don't have to stand exactly one after the other.
I rapidly researched this distinction between adverbial preposition and prepositional adverb.
Yeah.
Prepositional object.
Yeah.
So do you consider prepositional adverb also like considerable things in collocation research? So here.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Prepositional Adverbien.
Yeah, as a security or in the Fourier.
Yeah, of course. Of course, yeah, of course. And I think it's even especially these expressions are particularly helpful for learners. I think that they don't have to They don't have to think about is this feminine and what is the reflectional suffix I have to add here, but it's the expression. Im Bahnhof, auf der Straße, in die Schule, expression, ins Kino. This is what in very many cases it already happens in the textbooks. This is nothing new. Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think in English we have different types of words. Yeah, idioms and phrasal verbs. So
yeah,
there are different combination of words.
Since the languages are somewhat related, there are some similarities, but they are by far not identical. Otherwise, Germans would have no problem learning English, and they do have so.
Thank you for the presentation. And I've been interested in this topic of the while, as well as concerning English and German language.
Yeah.
And I like the model presented in the end, because I think one strength of prefabricated phrases in the acquisition process is that you get to act quickly when you learn a language.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a beginner level, and in the beginner level language, use is difficult because it's hard to express what you want to say, and you could say it much better than another language that you speak well.
Yeah.
Which we call last motion, a kind of state of language emergency. And I think if you teach the phrase early, especially phrases that are very, that you can use for many purposes.
Yeah.
That it provides you with time. You can say something. Oh, I have a question about this. You have that prefabricated, and you can think about what you say next.
Yeah.
So what I'm going with that. I think it's interesting if you present it early, but then bring them into a situation where they need to use the language.
Of course. Yeah.
But they pause to act in this language of the state. I think then those instructors, they become very useful, practical, they useful.
Modern textbooks, German textbooks, they very often use boxes, and there are boxes they are called Redemittel. And there are lists with expressions, useful expressions, and so on. But if their use is not being practiced in the classroom, this is worthless.
Yes, yeah.
What you have there is a list of words. Okay, fine, like many other boxes, like many other words. But this is what I mean, or what I wanted to say. If you have to practice this in the classroom, as you said, Notsituation, yeah, it has a Notsituation, and it frees cognitive capacity. As you said, lass mich noch mal darüber nachdenken. And then I have time to think, because this is an expression. Quick, I don't have to deliberately formulate it. I don't have to think about it. It's just there. And this is what makes a big difference between natural language acquisition and structured language acquisition. That in the natural context, the situation is always there. The context is always there. Yeah, so it's never context free. What children learn very early, even though they don't understand what they say is the situation. So they know in this situation I have to do this. I have to say this. I was just laughing because the other day I got a video clip from a friend of mine who filmed her grandchild. And this grandchild is very small, but he learned the expression 09. 09. And what he does is he uses that, the prosodic element, the expression, everything. This is how you say 09. You don't say 09. You don't say 09. You say 09. And this is what And use it. I have this video. This is maybe 5 minutes, and it's at least 20 times. So this is what children do when they acquire these expressions. They repeat, they repeat, they repeat, and they repeat it in the situationally adequate way. And this is what is interesting. And this is, I totally agree that in the classroom, this is no loss of time, I would say, in the classroom to practice in the classroom. If you do it every session, just 5 minutes, this is a lot. 5 minutes to practice these expressions in the role plays, in interactions, and there are very many methods. I don't know the English word for kugeln. You know that? I don't know the English expression, but that you change partners. There's one. There are five learners in the inside circle and 5 on the outside circle, and they speak with one another. And if you do this for practicing, for automatizing, just 5 to 10 minutes, but in every lesson, it's just a very short amount of time, but everyone gets to speak. Everyone gets to practice. And this, I think this is very important. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. And also this is 3-to-1 method. So become quicker, become more fluid, become more, and also more confident. I think this is important, not to be too shy to use the language, but if you train it, if you practice it in the classroom, then the probability that learners will be willing to transfer it to situations outside the classroom and they don't feel lost is high.
Thank you for your wonderful insight workshop. I have some questions regarding your approach.
Yeah.
Because you talk about the chunks and construction. I come from construction background, so you didn't go into the theoretical I had some experience with centralized planning construction for Korean learners. Korean speakers are learning German.
Yeah.
So I eventually made maybe 7 or 8 videos. So in those videos, you see that someone is moving something onto a place. This is a typical satellite planning construction. So at first, often fish, legen, stellen, and so on. Yeah. So if we test the German native speakers, their productions are complete, so without exception. And then we tested the Korean speakers, Korean native speakers. Their German levels were A2 and B1. So even though we showed them the same video clips, the Korean students learning German, they did not give a full completed satellite frame construction. Yeah. So which means they are, even though they are exposed to many German satellite frame construction. Yeah. Even though we emphasize these constructions in the classroom, the students still have difficulty in making fully grammatical sentences to the German mind. So in that sense, many people in the secondary education research area, they say that well, everyone any two acquisition takes place in parallel or with L1 preposition. So maybe
Okay.
many parts are shared, but then I mean the answer is not that simple. Yeah, and then my conjecture would be that maybe when we talk about L1 or dedicated position process, maybe we can say that there is a simple prototypical construction, not a mediumatic construction. Let's say SVO simple construction, and then after that, the exactly like the constructions come and join, right?
Yeah.
And then we also in English as well, we have a lot of highly complicated idiomatized expressions. They come maybe further later,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you even go into the details of the construction grammar position theory. So what's your
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's interesting, and I also have questions to you. Yeah, I didn't go into detail because I didn't have any time, as you see. I rushed through it, and I could not. It wasn't possible. Why I referred to the construction grammar approach is their conception of I came a little later. It's their conception of lexicon and grammar, and the fusion of these two parts of the language. So we all know that in a way it's artificial to have lexicon here and grammar there, that they are intertwined. Of course they are. But the constructive grammar was, in my opinion, the first theoretical approach that took that into account to say, okay, yeah, there are these, but we cannot separate it. And this was my starting point. My question to you is, you said we presented very many examples to the learners, and still they reacted totally in a totally different way as the L1 speakers of German. Yeah, you said they had a lot of input, they had a lot of exposure. Did they also practice it, or did they just listen?
I think they are also trained to write.
Yeah, to write. Right. Okay. I think.
When you have things like international, or starting from 1 to 6.
Yeah.
They went.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, one has to look into this into detail. I think it's very interesting what you say, because I also believe in acquisition sequences, and also think that that of course you cannot acquire something before you have acquired something else. So that there are necessary steps, that there are necessary constructions, there are necessary knowledge you have to have in order to continue to acquire the next one. So what you said was, or what you referred to was the identity hypothesis. It was also an expression. I don't remember the name anymore. Who said that the processes language L2 learners go through are the same as L1 learners. In a way, there's some evidence that this is true, but also that there are so big differences between these learner groups. If you learn a second or a third or fourth foreign language, you already have so many strategies. You have so much language knowledge. Also, this can interfere I mean, it's not that it's always useful or helpful, but sometimes it's also disturbing, the knowledge you already have. But your idea that there's a prototypical way that's applied first and then the details follow, I think this is very promising. So yeah, one has to look. I mean, I think it's important before you can make these grammar tests or these grammatical judgment tests, for example. There needs to be automatization. I mean, you cannot do this without that. Yeah. So and how can you automatize? By practice. It's not by understand. It's not just, oh, I understood. Oh, this is how it works. But it's by doing it. Yeah.
Okay, so we are running out of time, so we're gonna have only one more question.
Okay. Yeah, there's one.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'm Karin Aguado. I study English education. Your lecture made me think of Korean textbooks, how at first in the elementary school, we start from teaching these prefabricated methods, but then in middle and high school, we move on to more of a focus on grammar rules.
Yeah.
And that's sadly when many students lose interest in English very well.
Yeah.
I always thought I wanted to work on multiword for doing fluency. Is it too difficult to implement this kind of strategy as we progress further into language? So I wanted to ask you if you would recommend this approach to more intermediate and advanced classrooms as well.
Of course. This is you mean to start with these multi-word items? Also with more advanced learners?
Yes.
Yeah. I think since, well, it depends on how you count it, and it depends on your theory. But most estimations from researchers who work in this field say up to 80% of our language use is formula, is prefabricated. So what I want to say is it never stops. Yeah, it's the language. The more experience we have, the more we talk, the more lemmas we acquire, the more expressions we acquire, the more we acquire. So it's this is in a way I would never say you can stop with it. It's not only for the beginner and then you go to grammar. No, and it's not only for motivational reasons. Just to have learners, first of all, have fun with language, and then there is the hard work with the grammar. I mean, grammar is always there, but grammar is only has a serving function. Yeah, it's not what is language learning for. Language learning is for using language, for communicating, for getting across your message, for understanding what someone else tells you. So this is interacting. This is the main reason why we learn language, because we want to speak and we want to be heard, and so on. So I think there is no reason why it should stop. Especially there are some languages, and English is a very good example, that are so highly idiomatic, and the further you go with your English level, the more I wouldn't say difficult, but the more complex the words and the expressions become. In German, we have some good things in German. For example, we have these words with prefixes. We have one verb and we have 10 prefixes, and with the prefixes you can change the meaning of the word. In English, we have 10 words. Yeah. So this is how it is. This is what language
what languages make attractive. I think that they are not all alike; they are different. But especially for languages that are so highly idiomatic, I don't think that there is any point in time in the language learning process where you should stop. Notice it or being attentive to expressions. And this is, in German, it's very simple. Very many expressions in everyday language, very many that come from advertisement and so on. These are expressions, and they develop, they appear and they disappear. It's not something that you need to that you need to know forever, but you have to be aware or alert that there are these expressions and that you notice them and that you take them as they are. So I wouldn't say there's a point of time when you stop with it. Thank you.
Okay, so we're just about now, so we have to stop here. I'm sorry for that. So I want to thank you, all of you, for your participation and questioning, and also thank you so much for Dr. Karin Aguado for sharing your research with us. Before closing the invited talk, we're gonna have one word talk from the head of Center for Educational Research who have support our.
This is the director of the Center of Educational Research. We welcome all of you. We thank everybody for showing up. And we especially we express our gratitude to the invited speaker, Professor Karin Aguado. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, please, okay, again, thank you so much for your presentation, and please join me again in thanking Dr. Karin Aguado for your presentation.
Yes, thank you.